on this In Solidarity presentation for the International Day of Eliminating Violence Against Women. I am here today to host. Sorry, I'm not. We've been having technical difficulties, and Sandra Azocar was supposed to be here too, as many of you know. All the fans. I'm a fan of hers too. She's not here right now, so it is my duty and my honor to do land acknowledgements. So we are in Edmonton, which is located in Treaty 6 territory, and within the Métis homelands and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. We acknowledge that this land, traditional territories of many First Nations, such as the Iniwa, Cree, the Dene, and the Nakota Sioux, as well as many others. And I would like to personally just give thanks as a political refugee. Thank you for allowing us to find refuge here. I guess I will introduce myself. My name is Gabriela Rosende. I am a local artist. I predominantly work with themes of human rights issues. So that's why I've been asked here on this panel today. And right now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Carmen Aguirre. Carmen Aguirre, core artist at Vancouver's Electric Company Theatre and artistic associate of new play development at the Stratford Festival, is an award-winning theatre artist and author. She has written and co-written over 25 plays. The #1 international bestseller, Something Fierce, Memoirs of a Revolutionary Daughter, winner of CBC Canada Reads 2012, and its best-selling sequel, Mexican Hooker #1, and My Other Roles Since the Revolution. Currently, she is writing an adaptation of Euripides' Medea, Moliere's, and Learned Ladies for Toronto's Factory Theatre. Fire Never Dies, the Tina Modotti Project for Electric Company, and an adaptation of Limbaugh and Rudikers, The Many-Headed Hydra for the Stratford Festival's Seed Commission program. Her digital piece, Floating Life, commissioned by Stratford, can be viewed on its website. Carmen has over 80 film, television, and stage acting credits. Favorites include her award-winning work as Veronica in the Canadian premiere of Stephen Adley's I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name.
I think it's Gurgis.
Gurgis is the motherfucker with the hat. And playing the lead role of Daniela and Cecilia Areneda's stunning independent feature intersection. Carmen is a 2020 Simonovich Prize finalist, Canada's most prestigious theater award. She's a graduate of Studio 58, and you can see more about Carmen and her work at www.carmenaguirre.ca. Welcome, Carmen. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about your book, Mexican Hooker #1, and My Other Role Since the Revolution, and the connection to why we are here today on this International Day of Eliminating Violence Against Women.
Sure. And first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm joining you from downtown Vancouver, which is on unceded Squamish territory, and I'm very grateful to be on Squamish land. And I also know that we have a great compañero of mine, Daniel Villalobos, here with us today. Daniel and I met many years ago in Edmonton. It's so great to see you, Daniel. And I don't know if Sandra is here with us. She's been having unfortunately, all these issues with her internet. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself a bit more than what I just did?
Well, no, absolutely, Sandra. And sorry, Carmen. Yeah, I can. All I can say about myself, I'm over a decade immigrant in Edmonton, former street performer, and I'm an activist. I'm an active member of Memoria Viva Society for many years. We organize and believe that the change of society should come from the arts, and that's our way to speak to the community by organizing and by getting the community together. In Edmonton specifically.
Oh, and it's so great to be talking to fellow Chilenos. It's very rare that I actually get to do that. So I feel like a super strong kinship with with both of you. Yes. So about my book, Mexican Hooker #1, and my other roles since the revolution, I guess it is apropos of today, the International Day to End Violence Against Women, because the book basically tells the story, amongst other stories, but kind of the spine of the book tells the story of my experience, not only of being brutally raped at gunpoint when I was a child here in Vancouver by a very infamous serial child rapist, referred to as the paper bag rapist. Uh, of equal importance, the book is about my transformative justice process that I went through in regards to that rape that took many, many, many years, and that ended with me going to Bowden Institution, which is just south of Edmonton, actually, where he is incarcerated, and having a 5-hour face-to-face meeting with him, which was facilitated, of course, by a transformative justice nonprofit organization. And this was the first time I ever actually got to have eye contact with this man. Because he's referred to as the paper bag rapist, he would cover his own head or the heads of his victims with a paper bag or a blindfold. In my case, it was with a blindfold, so I had never seen him during the attack. So I think that what we all kind of thought would be super interesting to talk about today is my interest in transformative justice, as opposed to a culture of incarceration and punishment, and the taboo of speaking about men who offend as humans. And I'm not really interested in labeling these men monsters, because I don't think that helps us as a society to actually deal with violence, in this case, sexual violence, of course, against women. I have noticed that we are in a time, in a current climate, in regards to these topics, where very often we immediately jump to publicly shaming and publicly outing men who have behaved inappropriately or criminally when it comes to sexual assault or sexual harassment. Now, I am no longer talking about the paper bag rapist who is in a league of his own, that he is a psychopath. And he has admitted to attacking hundreds of children in a premeditated fashion. So I've left that topic aside. Now I'm on to a different topic of men who are not psychopaths, and how we are, I have noticed and I have witnessed that we are currently in a climate where men who are, like I said, who have behaved inappropriately or even criminally when it comes to sexual assault or sexual harassment are publicly shamed, publicly outed, called monsters. And there's a real call for punishment. And quite often, these kinds of behaviors that I'm describing, which happen very often on social media, alarmingly for me at least, are coming from people who also claim to be prison abolitionists, or people who are interested in social justice, who are against the police. So for me, there's a real disconnect between those two things. So I thought that's what I would start with. Again, really interested in talking about transformative justice, what that might look like, how we go about it, what can we learn from it. Are we, I know I'm not, interested in simply banishing, shaming, punishing, and incarcerating men who are not psychopaths, who have behaved inappropriately or even criminally with women. So I don't know if Daniel and Gabriela, if you want to ask me questions or give your opinion. I'm open to however you want to proceed.
I would like,
Go
yeah,
ahead, William.
do have some sort of conflicts with because I know what you said. Some people are psychopath, right? Some people have a psychological disorder that will not allow them to either feel remorse or to recognize or understand the damage they're doing. And there are people and offenders that can. Um, where do you draw the line? How do you forgive a psychopath and not somebody like who decides that? The justice system, psychoanalysis, or what?
Yeah, who decides whether somebody is a psychopath or not are people who are qualified to make that decision, right? So
Of
in
course,
the case of John Horace Soughton, who is the man who I was referring to, who was referred to as a paper bag rapist, there's a team of doctors and psychiatrists and very qualified people who make that determination, right? Who determine that he is indeed a psychopath. And the way that that is determined, I mean, I don't know the way that it's determined, but the definition of a psychopath is somebody who is not capable of feeling remorse. And so, in a case like his, he is not capable of feeling remorse. I believe that he is where he should be. He is a person who, if released, would, very likely reoffend. Um, but he is a very, very, very small percentage of the population, right? Very small percentage of the population, which is why I think he is actually not the best example ever uh, for this kind of topic. Having said that, the reason that I went through a transformative justice process with him was because I really needed to, and I'm actually quoting a very close friend of mine right now. I'm not quoting myself. I really needed to have a face-to-face and eye contact with a man I'd been in a relationship with since I was a child. I needed to talk to him, to leave some stuff at his feet, and to even out the power imbalance between us by facing him across a table and not letting up with the eye contact for 5 hours straight. And that did not happen overnight, right? That transformative justice process arguably began, I don't even remember it, like 25 years ago, when I went to the first parole hearing that I heard of, right? That he has a parole hearing every 2 years. And I went to that one, and that was the first time I saw him. And then I've been going to almost every single one since then. So one could say that transformative justice for me in regards to him began with those parole hearings. Really, officially, it began the day that I met with his brother. And that was brokered by this amazing transformative justice organization that does these kinds of things. So it was amazing to meet with his brother and to talk with his brother, who was extremely generous in answering any and all questions that I had in regards to their childhood and in regards to the rapist himself, John Horace Soughton. And what I walked away from in that meeting with his brother that was facilitated, like I said, was that his brother was also a victim. It was really, really interesting to listen to his brother tell me and the other victims, because there were a few of us who were at this meeting, to hear him tell us how the capture, which took 8 years, the capture of the paper bag rapist affected him and his children and his wife. How his children were bullied, how he lost his job, how they went bankrupt, how they lost pretty much everything because he happened to be the brother of the paper bag rapist. And that name was splashed all over the media for a long time, for months and months and months and months and months. So it was really eye-opening to see how that had affected him, and how this transformative justice process that I began with him helped him as well. You know, it was very, very healing for him to meet some of his brother's victims. But in regards to somebody who is not a psychopath, right? You know, so like a more common scenario might be, you know, that I am on a date with somebody, or somebody is on a date with somebody, and the date goes awry, you know, and at the end of the night, 9 times out of 10, it's the woman, right? The woman feels that something wrong happened, you know, that there was alcohol involved. She doesn't quite remember what happened. She doesn't feel like she consented. It just feels bad. I believe that that kind of scenario is kind of ideal for a transformative justice process, as opposed to a public shaming, public outing, calling for punishment, and exiling from the community of the man that I feel may have really crossed a line with me on a date. And I know that this is probably a how do you say that, controversial thing to say, but I think that that is what needs to be said right now in the current climate that we're in. And I feel like I'm talking a lot, so if if there's other questions or comments, that would be great.
Yeah, this is Sandra Azocar. I have to apologize. The technology was not my friend today, and I was supposed to introduce the topic area, but I see you guys have done a wonderful job, and I was able to listen to a little bit of what you were saying, Carmen, and thank you for sharing your story and your background. I think in a lot of ways what we often hear is the word restorative justice when it comes to situations like this. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between transformative justice and restorative justice when it comes to dealing with some of the scenarios that you described?
Yeah, I think that the difference is, as far as I can tell, that restorative justice is when you need to restore a relationship that was already there. You know, that there was already a relationship, something happened, it all went awry, maybe a crime was committed, right? And you need to restore that relationship, you need to heal it. I think transformative justice, which is how I would describe what the process that I went through with John Horace Oughton. There was no relationship before. This is an absolute stranger who abducted me in the street when I was a child at gunpoint and attacked me. So there's nothing to restore there. And I have no interest in having any kind of relationship with him. It's not like I'm trying to start some kind of friendship with the man or anything like that, right? It was really more for me. And I'm a person who never felt, and this is, every victim is different. I'm very close friends with some of the other victims that he attacked. I've met them through the parole hearings. So this is not the case with them. But I have never felt angry towards him, nor have I ever felt hatred towards him. I have always felt compassion towards him. Only because I suppose that even during the attack itself, I was able, even though I was a child, I was able to see his humanity. And that has helped me. You know, I feel compassion for him, not because I'm interested in, oh, does he deserve compassion? Does he not deserve compassion? Who gives a shit about him? It makes me happy, right?
Yeah.
I'm happy to feel compassion towards him. I would not be happy feeling hatred and anger towards him, and he wouldn't care. He doesn't even know me, right? Really. So who cares about him at the end of the day? It's really about me and the fact that, isn't it great that I have not felt anger or hatred towards him, because it helps my mental health.
Yeah. You were talking about, some of the people that want to see that punishment, that want to see those men that sometimes cross the line, and that, the argument could be a conversation about patriarchy and how those lines that are crossed are easily blurred by what men think is their a right behavior or not, or what their privilege gives them, or men or women in this case. But how do we support women in finding that, I guess, that developing that strength to confront this type of trauma like you have through the work that you've been able to do?
Well, I mean, Tarana Burke, I think, who is, as far as I'm concerned, a huge example and a hero of mine, I think had the right idea and has the right idea when she started the Me Too movement 15 years ago, which, as far as I can tell, was really about doing exactly what you just said, Sandra, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is to create space for, in her case, I think she was pretty specific, women of color, Black women, brown women, poor women, to have circles to come together and share their stories, as opposed to focusing on the men, being obsessed with the men, being obsessed with punishment, and shaming them. Uh, More focused on let's us get together, let's share our stories, let's support each other, let's share resources. So if I were to go to one of those circles, one of the resources I would share would be, hey, if anybody's interested, there's this transformative justice organization that you can go to, and they will be there for you if that's the route you want to go, if that is something you want to do. So I think it's about creating space for women to come together and share our stories. I mean, in regards to the patriarchy, well, I'm a feminist, obviously. Do I love the patriarchy? Of course not. But not because it hurts women, because it hurts men and women, because it hurts everybody, right?
Yeah.
Do I want my son to be told that he shouldn't cry because he's a boy, or that he should, be sexually aggressive with women, even though he's not really sure if he has full consent, because that's what men do? Of course not. That's very hurtful to him as well, So I think the patriarchy is a terrible thing for all of us, not for women, for all of us, Yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but again, I really, really want to drive the point home, because I have more than one, at this point, quite a few male friends, and they are my friends. I would never disown them as friends, who have been publicly shamed, publicly outed, whose lives have been destroyed, because of a trespass, perhaps even criminal behavior once, that they feel terrible about. And so I look at those cases that I'm close to, and I go, wouldn't it have been great if this had actually gone through a transformative justice process, as opposed to destroying somebody's life, Yeah. So again, if there's more questions or anything anybody else
It's
wants
almost like the Me Too movement, instead of balancing, like, I guess ideally what I would envision would be like almost like a yin yang. So you want to take feminine energies and male energies, or aggressive energies and passive energies, and have them balanced, as opposed to just, having, because right now the patriarchy, we have the male energy way up here, but it seems like the Me Too movement started to do this, but then it decided to do this, where it's like, no, women on top. And Um, I don't know if I feel like I was really listening to what you said about transformative justice. And the only time I had ever heard about it before was actually through an Indigenous course where they were talking both about restorative justice, about, what's happened to them, but also about transformative justice. And their example was if you had a family and this man came along and murdered the husband, well, if you put that man in jail, you leave the family without a patriarch. You leave the family without someone to support them. So what do? So that guy gets to go to jail, and the woman gets punished because she can't afford or take care of her family on her own. And so she's struggling. She's, not going anywhere. And then the guy in jail isn't learning anything either. So what they do instead is they would do something, for example, like have him work, and then his money would go to provide for this family. And in that, I guess he would learn that he took away that resource for that person, and that would be the lesson learned, right? So when I hear you talking about transformative justice, I think had I talked to you about a year ago, my feelings would have been completely opposite to what they are now. I mean, now I'm kind of open to this idea, but I think at one point I would have been like those Me Too women and really just, they hurt me, I want to hurt them back. So how do we get this idea of transformative justice out there?
I think that one of the reasons why we're in the climate that we're in right now, right? Where, let's say, again, I'll just use the same example. I feel that, a date went awry and possibly a crime was committed against me. I just go and publicly shame the person, ask them for them to be banished, ask for them to be fired from their job. You know where I'm going with this. I mean, we've all seen it. It's happening as we speak to many people, right? Is that we are still in capitalism, right? So, the anti-racist movement, the feminist movement, the Me Too movement, all of these are not challenging capitalism, which is why they're not that interesting to me, So I don't care if we have, 50 more women who have the same wealth as what's his name, Bezos and Elon Musk. This is not the answer. Oh, let's have more women there, you know. Oh, I think Hillary Clinton's great because she's a woman. No, I don't. I don't think she's great. She's a war criminal as far as I'm concerned, right? So what is my point? When we go through everything we're going through without actually talking about alternative models of justice that are not based on punishment and banishment and the prison industrial complex, right? And putting more men in jail, right? Mostly who are poor and brown and black, right? We're not actually changing anything, So in talking about, in bringing to light, for example, violence against women and talking about it, we also hand in hand have to be talking about alternative models, alternative societies. And there are many models out there, I'm sure that you all, because of we're all Chilenos here and I know where we all come from. We all remember the Nicaraguan Revolution, right, which triumphed in 1979. And one of the revolutionary things that the Sandinistas did in the 1980s, I know they're not very popular right now, so I'm not talking about the Sandinistas right now. I'm talking about the Sandinistas in the 1980s. I want to be very clear about that. Was that the women, the Sandinista women, kind of took over the justice system in Nicaragua at that time in regards to what were they going to do with all of the milicos. And for all of you out there who don't know what milicos mean, all of the military men, right? The somocistas, the death squad members, the torturers, the men who ran the concentration camps, who committed horrific crimes against humanity, the Sandinistas were interested in an alternative model of justice for those men, right? So one way was, hey, let's just execute all of them. You know, fuck it. We all know all the crimes against humanity they committed. Let's execute them. Quick trials, execute the fuck out of them, right? That would have been completely understandable. Nobody's going to sit there and go, how dare you? I mean, these are horrible crimes against humanity. But what they attempted to do, and, you know, it can be argued whether they were successful at it or not. That's a different argument. But what they attempted to do was actually, how do you say that? Not reform. I guess restore, right? Restore, reform a lot of these men in these different programs that they had, and try to insert them into society, into a socialist society, which is what they were working on in the 1980s in Nicaragua. And I think that in many cases it worked. You know, I think in many cases it didn't work, but I think in many cases it did. And I think part of the reason why Nicaragua, unlike Guatemala, unlike El Salvador, unlike Honduras, doesn't have a Mara Salvatrucha problem. The Maras don't really exist to the degree that they exist in the other three countries that I mentioned. And I think that there is a correlation between the justice system that was practiced, you know, in the 1980s in in Nicaragua during the first Sandinista government, and the fact that they don't have as big a gang problem right now as their neighbors do. I went off on a bit of a tangent, but I think the tangent has to do with, we can't be talking about everything we're talking about, which in this case is violence against women, and how do we find justice for women who are survivors of sexual violence at the hands of men, without also talking about a system, a justice system that doesn't do the exact same thing that we are also criticizing, right? Because we're all criticizing the prison industrial you know what I'm saying, complex. We are all criticizing the cops. But yet this is exactly what we're doing. You know, by demanding that men who may have committed a crime, right, before they ever go to trial, before there's any kind of investigation, publicly demanding that they be fired from their jobs, which is the equivalent of demanding that they no longer live.
Yeah.
And that their families no longer live, you know?
Carmen, can I interrupt and just introduce everybody to Rod Loyola, who's sitting there patiently?
Yes, I just saw Rodrigo.
Rod, could you, as one of the, you know, like as a very genuine, what I would consider a healthy male, would you opine on this topic, please?
Well, you humble me. I think that I'm a human being just like everybody else. I commit my mistakes, but of course, we're learning every day, right? And the reality is that I think that just as Carmen was talking about women creating spaces for women to talk about these issues and uplift themselves and like critically analyze what they're going through, I think that men need to create those spaces too. And where we can challenge concepts of patriarchy and misogyny and talk about number one, what is toxic masculinity? What does that look like? And how do we get rid of it? Because of course, as we all know, we're constantly being bombarded with media, and especially young boys through Hollywood. And the immediate example that comes to mind when we talk about Hollywood and influencing young Latinos is Scarface. Like, I don't know how many young Latinos I spoke to when I was growing up, and like Scarface was like it was the bomb ass movie, man. And like, and they would act like Scarface, you know? And that's what they thought was the role model of being a man. And luckily, I think that others of us, because of the circles we were in, we had other examples. Of course, not that they were, 100% awesome, but I mean, like we talked about, Salvador Allende as being an example, right? Which was very distinct from that Hollywood character developed that was quite misogynistic, quite violent, right? And so that we could juxtapose those two things, right? And so I think that it depended on what circles you ran in. But if you're not having the conversations about them, then it's impossible to dismantle all of that which you're going through. And Gabi, you said something really that resonated a lot with me, is that if you would have asked me this a year ago, my response would have been completely different. And I think that when it comes to these issues and when we're sharing with other people in the community, we need to acknowledge that everybody's at a specific time and place in their understanding, and that we need to be gentle with one another when having these conversations. Because it's very easy for us to go to the usual response, which is to judge somebody for something they don't know or that they're not doing, so we judge them for it. And I know that in the past I was horrible at this. I was a person that did that. But with time, I've learned how to be more understanding, more loving, more willing to listen even. There was a time in my life where I wasn't that great of a listener. I admit that. But because I was able to participate in circles where I could learn how to be a better human being, I've started changing, transforming, right? If we're going to go with this transformative justice idea. And I think that we can create those spaces for ourselves. Like, we have the ideal of where we want to go in the community and the society that we want to build. But in the meantime, we try to create those spaces. And I think that it's one of the things that I'm doing. Like, for example, many in the community know that I reverted to Islam a while ago. And one of the things that I created a couple summers ago was the Muslim Motorcycle Club. Now, women are completely encouraged to come and ride with the Muslim, but the reality is that the majority of them are men. So I actually use that space to talk about things like patriarchy and misogyny with men and it's not all Muslims, but for example, the majority of the men in the group are Pakistani. So they come from a culture that is predominantly very patriarchal, very, very patriarchal. And so that I can challenge them on the differences between what's culture and what's religion, right? And we can have these discussions. Yeah.
I think it's...
As the only man, now I'm going to shut up.
I really enjoy the fact that you were talking about spaces for men, because ironically, last week I was saying that, like, I hear about spaces for women all the time. And, like, when something happens, there are options for women as far as calling. And I looked at Dustin and I said, well, what do guys do? And he said, I don't know. So I said, wouldn't it be cool if there was like a therapy gym? And he's like, a therapy gym? I'm like, like, work out, get out your anger. And then when you feel like you've calmed down, or if you feel like you can open up to someone, then you just talk to someone right there and then, and then he just looked at me and kind of like, ha ha ha, you're so funny. But I was talking.
That sounds really
seriously.
cool, though.
It's like something, you know?
Well, I think
Just
the one thing that we have to, go ahead, Sandra, go ahead.
for the people that are watching and you're kind of wondering when do you get to ask questions, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions about these things.
Sure.
I think we my part of the speech here was supposed to talk about the fact that the movement to end violence against women is not anything new, and I know that it's far from over. The fight is still far from over, and it's a situation that anytime that we get a crisis or a pandemic, for example, the rate of violence against women increases exponentially. And so while we're discussing these complex structural factors that impact violence against women, I think it's really important to have these conversations and to look at some of the solutions. And I know that, for example, Gabriela, who's by the way an awesome artist, and I don't think she did a really expansive introduction of herself and her awesome achievements as an artist. Was also, somebody who found herself having to deal with these issues of childhood trauma. And for both you and Carmen, what do you think art has had in terms of the role in finding that meaning in life and developing that strength that you need to kind of overcome some of those issues?
Well, yes. As far as I'm concerned, and there's different opinions on this. If you are creating art for solely for personal catharsis, that's not art. That's therapy. So, in my case, I did not write the book, or I wrote a play like 15, 16 years ago called The Trigger, which was about that rape. I did not do those in order to heal from trauma. I would have considered that therapy and self-indulgent. Artwork always has to be about the audience. You are always entering into a conversation with the audience or with the reader, not into a conversation with yourself. To me, that's self-indulgent. So for example, the book, The Mexican Hooker #1, the theme of the book is healing from PTSD. And so everybody can relate to that because everybody on earth has some kind of trauma, right? They might not have PTSD per se, but everybody can relate to being hurt somehow, some way, right? Everybody relates to pain, right? And healing from it and going on some kind of a healing journey. So for me, what has helped me is therapy. So I complex PTSD all the way. I did literally a decade of EMDR therapy, years of body work, all kinds of therapy. And I had access to it because I have class resources. I'm not from the working poor, so I have class resources. And I was able to do the EMDR, for 10 years for free, thanks to Richmond Family Services, which is a suburb south of Vancouver. And I was able to access an incredible therapist who had a private practice and who donated 1 day of the week to family services. So that's how I was able to access that therapy. But for me, art can never be therapy for the artist. If it's therapeutic for the audience, that's a wonderful thing. That is amazing, But if it's therapeutic for the artist, then I start to go, is it therapy? I want to be super clear. I'm not saying that you have to, as an artist, have healed from trauma in order to create artwork about it. Of course not. I'm just saying that if the only reason you are doing it is to heal or for personal catharsis, as opposed to universal experience, which is where the audience comes in, then it's therapy.
I would, I think, sort of agree. I find that I've been doing art most of my life, and I didn't come to terms with what had happened to me until I was 28. It was sort of repressed stuff, but I've been drawing since I've been 7. To me, because of my child abuse, I was a very quiet child. I kept to myself. I didn't go outside very much. And so art for me was just, it was a language that I couldn't tap into. I couldn't speak to people. I could barely look them in the eye. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, as a lot of, I guess, people who suffer any kind of abuse really get, a bruise to their ego, right? So I just, I felt tainted and dirty, and I didn't feel like I was worthy of a lot of people's attention. So I didn't speak, but I drew, and that became a language that I can communicate with others. And that's what it's always been for me, is a means of communication. If I get anything else from it, really, it's more spiritual. It's almost like I lose myself and I become this entity that is outside of myself. But art itself was never about my trauma. And when I did use it, it was for that universal aspect, to make connections, to say, can you relate to this? Do you relate to any aspect of this? And speaking about art, I actually had a question for you, Carmen, because I'd been thinking about this and about my trauma. And so my question was, do you think speaking out is the key to healing? And what advice would you have for victims that have been coerced by the culture of silence to stay silent? I guess that's it.
Yes, I think that speaking out is a key to healing, and that looks different for different people. Like for some people, it's uh, going to a therapist and telling a therapist. For some people, it's very private, the speaking out. Or telling a friend, or just talking to a friend. For some people, it's going to a healing circle, like the kind that Tarana Burke was starting, or has started, or has been doing for 15 years when she started the Me Too movement. And for some people, it is about publicly going on social media and naming the person and demanding that they lose their job and lose everything. Like it looks different for different people. Um, but I think it is, you talk about shame, it's a toxic shame, right? That takes over your entire life. And I think it's something, like I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't believe that like I'll speak about myself. Um, Childhood rape, which is what I've been public about, is not something that you get over, right? You don't get over childhood rape, of that sort, of any sort, obviously. But I'm talking about, a very violent childhood rape at gunpoint, with an abduction, with a blindfold, with psychological torture, etc. You learn to integrate it into your life experience, and you do deal with toxic shame, pretty much, I think, for the rest of your life, and you just learn to manage it better, right? And to um, identify it when it comes up, and hopefully have some kind of coping mechanism to, once you've identified, oh, that's what's going on right now, and this is how it's manifesting, how can I take care of myself at this moment of toxic shame? And usually that toxic shame for most people, certainly for me, and from all the conversations I've ever had with fellow survivors, comes up in intimacy, and it's very difficult to finally come to the conclusion, oh shit, that's what's going on right now. Oh, okay. Like, takes a lot of work to go, oh crap, okay, that's what's happening right now. Toxic shame in regards to that attack. Okay, got it. It's being triggered right now. So yes, to answer your question, I think that not keeping it to ourselves and finding a way to talk about it in whatever way makes sense to each person is definitely really key for healing. And, you know, one thing that I wanted to say, um, or would I call myself a Buddhist or just following a similar path? I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist because I wouldn't want to, how do you say that? Insult people who are Buddhists because I don't practice Buddhism per se. But yes, I would say that I have a similar path. I have a very strong meditation practice that I've had for about, 24 years. And that certainly has helped me. And certainly feeling compassion is something that has helped me. But what I was going to say earlier is that I am 100% convinced that men who abuse have been abused. You know, nobody comes out, arise into the world. I really believe that. I really believe that not a single person arrives into the world as a baby as an abuser. I just don't believe that to be the case, you know? So I do believe that men who abuse have been abused and have not healed, because if they had healed their abuse, they would not be out abusing other people. You know, so we
So I
have
guess
to,
that's
like
an
that
interesting
cycle.
yeah,
comment, Carmen, because you mentioned that, like you gave the example a couple of times of uh, of going on a date and the man kind of like exceeds the line, or just becomes a little bit too, just goes over above what was supposed to happen. Um, would you consider that then, that kind of sexual abuse where a man would have had to be hurt in any way, or would you call that? See, I think that goes back to the question that I had about, what is it, the entitlement that people feel over somebody else, or the lack of boundaries. Is that sexual assault? Is that sexual abuse? What is that? And I think sometimes that we get lost in definitions of what those interactions are really about. Because those guys may not have been sexually abused. They just may think that that's what men do, or
yeah.
whatever.
But I think that toxic masculinity, which Rod referred to earlier,
Mm-hmm.
toxic masculinity is a form of abuse towards boys. I do. I believe that toxic masculinity, like telling boys that they shouldn't cry, telling boys that they have to be men, telling boys that they have to behave a certain way around women, telling boys that if they don't put the moves on a woman, they are, pussies or what, fill in the blank, right? I believe that culture, toxic masculinity, is abusive to boys. I do,
And
Yes.
sometimes I think there's issues with miscommunication and misunderstandings too. Like
Yeah.
if you're like, let's say if you're a female in a situation where you're feeling threatened, and you're strong enough, you're going to say, hey man, back off. But let's say some people don't feel strong enough and they retreat, and so they say nothing, and then everything proceeds, and the guy assumes that, oh, it was all kosher because nothing was said, but the
Yeah.
girl was just so afraid that she couldn't say anything. And then there's like, different instances where, the guy is like a psychopath and he's just, doing this serially to every other second woman,
Yes.
which is a totally different, I think,
Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah.
I have a question for both Gabriela and Carmen and Danielle and Rod. I think sometimes women feel that when somebody comes to them and tells them, that something has gone wrong, you always get that need to be that extra feminist type of support, and go in there and demanding action. And sometimes when you look at men that you might know, and you just want to protect them as well, how do you, what can you tell women that their role could be when somebody comes out with an allegation? how do you balance that from what we have been talking about with transformational justice and so forth? And then what do men tell the men who might have been involved in a situation like that? I don't know if I made myself clear.
I think you did, and I think that's why this conversation is so interesting, because there's so much nuance. I mean, I think it would depend on the situation, right? Like, obviously, if a friend of mine came up to me and said I was attacked in the street by a psychopath at gunpoint and they raped me, call the cops. Like, excuse me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, but with all these other more gray areas, like the one that you were describing, Gabriela, right? Like, if a female friend came up to me, and this has happened many times, people do come and tell me their stories, and said, I froze, and I felt completely frozen and numb for the entire thing. And I didn't say anything. And, stuff happened that I didn't really want to happen, but I wasn't able to say anything. I would ask a bunch of questions, right? Is this person somebody that is a friend of yours that you would otherwise trust? Is this somebody that you've been dating for a while? Like, let's get all the details, before I would give an opinion as to how to proceed, right? But usually in a case like that, I think that what most women want is a conversation, is to be heard, is to get together with the guy and say to the guy, listen, just so you know, this is what was actually going on for me. And for all these reasons, I was not able to speak up. And I just need you to listen to me. Don't say a word. Just listen to me. Okay? And then maybe you can tell me what was going on for you. And then maybe we can have a conversation. And, ideally, I really want you to apologize and tell me what you learned from this scenario and how you will behave in the future if you find yourself in a scenario like this one again, where the woman isn't saying anything. Like, have you learned that maybe the woman isn't saying anything because she doesn't actually want to be there and she's frozen in the moment? That's what I would suggest, which is transformative justice. And you might want to have that conversation with a facilitator, as opposed to, I'm going to go on social media and out this guy and demand that he be fired from his work and that everybody shun him and he should be shamed and he should be punished. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I'd say similar. My first thing would be to be an ear, right? If you experience something horrible, you totally just need to get it out. If it was a situation where there was like torn clothes and blood and stuff like that, I would immediately rush into emergency. But if it was a situation where it was like just a lot of hurt and a lot of confusion, because sometimes it's just like, I don't know what the hell went wrong, then I would totally be an ear and try to do the same. Like, maybe you just need to talk to him, like, and if you're afraid, maybe it could be like at a coffee shop or something, that you guys need to talk this out, because obviously by, what's going down, it doesn't look like he knows what's going on either. I don't know.
And if I could jump off that, Gabi,
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know how we are in 2021 and just how some men could just be oblivious to this. Because, I mean, there's the whole body language that's going on when people are intimate. And if someone's so quiet and just laying there and like not reciprocating, that there's something wrong. Like, you think there's something wrong. But sometimes it's not like that either. So I think that, and both of you have pointed to this, is this the transformative justice aspect, is the learning. And you know how we say in Spanish, mejor prevenir que curar, right? it's better to prevent than to try to heal it afterwards. So then for men, yeah, going back to these circles of where men need to be able to have these discussions and be like, look, this is what asking for consent can look like. Like, I'm not going to tell you that this is always how it's going to be the best way, but you need to get consent, right? It's and if that consent doesn't exist, then you're pack up and leave.
Yeah.
Pack up
Yeah.
and leave. Right?
Exactly.
Or you stay and you just have a conversation, but like, like, so I think that that's one of the things that even from both my boys, many of you know I have two beautiful boys, and we have conversations about what consent looks like all the time, and not just in like romantic relationships. It's just like consent in general, right? Like, and I think that the more that we have those conversations in men's circles, and because there's a lot of men that make fun of, well, what does consent look like, and like, does it mean, like, I'm sure you've heard it before. I don't want to go into it. Right? Like, just ignorant comments about what consent looks like. So, but yeah, once you can develop a space, and a genuine space where people are free and feel comfortable having those conversations, and not being afraid. And sometimes, yeah, they are going to be like, yeah, well, what's consent? I don't even understand it. But then having someone to explain it and go through it, or at least the way that person understands it, and go from there.
Mm. I guess for me, I don't know if Danielle is on. I can't see anything, and I don't know if there's any questions
Yes,
from
Danielle
the audience.
is there. Yes.
Daniel is there. Daniel is there. I see him.
The only thing I can add to what you said, Rod, and what the comments were made about toxic masculinity, it's essentially that, I mean, there is a generation of, some people are called the millennials, or the boom, or the Zoom generation, or we catalog, to what we've been through. Ultimately, us as fathers and as friends, as people that relate to other people, and have several conversations with many friends, or on a daily basis. The change does not only start with you and how you want to present yourself, but it's also on how we teach our children, and how we teach others. Like, I see that at work all the time, per se. I'm a tradesman. I work in a toxic masculinity. It's wild, man. Like, people in the trades, man, they're like old school. Like, they have that mentality, and you're somewhat the outsider. But changing the way we speak to each other, changing the way the narrative, trying to change the adjectives that we use when we refer to women, and when we refer to those sexist comments, especially us South Americans, or Chileans, that we come from a very sexist society, where the patriarchy, it's prime, and it's hard to break from that habit. And it is really hard to break from it, because even having a conversation with someone, through a joke, that just to make somebody laugh or something, but like, in the end, you're contributing, and you're making that offense valid. So I think the true change must start with the people we can speak to every day, with the conversations that we can have, and without the fear of thinking what they're gonna think or say, or what their behaviors are gonna be like. I don't really want to share, my personal experiences or anything like that from my past, but it's somewhat a big contradiction that you can't be yourself, or you can say the things, because we're afraid to speak to each other. But in the end, just letting it out, just being able to talk about it freely, may free you. And we need to start changing. We need to start changing the way we think about women, in terms of the patriarchy, like that we were saying before too. So I think it all goes in the narrative and how we speak and how we refer to that. And that's how we need to end the violence. Consent, like all these movements, el feminismo, la feminazis, all that stuff, that all this world that's being created, and the social media invasion, the sexuality of what we see, the images and TV ads and all that. We have to be very, very, very careful, but at the same time, embrace conversation and embrace the clarity and embrace love.
Thank you. I think for me, it takes definitely what you're talking about, the change in narrative and creating those spaces and having these conversations. But I think, this day starts on the 25th of November, where it's a International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and it ends on December the 10th, which is the Day of Human Rights. And for me, it's about that. I think we all have a right to live in peace, and it comes down to valuing human beings and valuing each other, because I think a lot of times in society we don't value the vulnerable, and women and children are usually vulnerable. And so until we start talking about human rights and talking about these issues from that lens, I think, we can talk till we're blue in the face at sometimes, and changing who we are, and the change has to come from each one of us. But we also have to look at all those, like I said, those structural complex barriers that prevent women and children from being valued in society. And that goes, is it capitalism, is it whatever it is, but I think that's a fundamental change that needs to happen as well. I don't know if there's any questions, and I don't know how much time we have left, because we could talk forever. But
Yeah, I think we're supposed to be done about now.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know if there are questions.
Chris, is there any questions?
No questions.
No
Oh,
questions.
that's good. I guess that means we were quite thorough.
Yes, either we baffled them with our brilliance, or dazzled them with our brilliance, or baffled them with our BS.
Yes.
Yes. I would like to think that we did the first. But I want to thank everybody who joined us today, and I definitely want to thank Carmen. I think her website was included in her little name, and Gabriela's website as well. You can look at her art in her website. Maybe you guys can repeat it. And of course, Rod, you know where you can find them. Usually bugging the UCP.
Trying to
bug. And Danielle is a member of Memoria Viva, an organization here from Edmonton that strives to keep the memory of why it is that Chileans arrived in Canada in the 70s, and what brought us here to this country of ours. And my name is Sandra Azocar, and I'm with the Chilean Canadian Society. And of course, Chris Munoz is in the background, and he's with Culture Edmonton, who are the ones that put this panel together. And I wanted to thank everybody. And I think if anybody has any further questions, feel free to reach out to any of the panelists. And I think this is a really important conversation. It's a timely conversation that we need to have as we move out of this pandemic. And I think, if anything, this pandemic definitely shone a light on situations that we had seen. I mean, the increase of domestic violence cases, of child abuse, like I said, was exponentially. And this is not the only crisis that we will see in the next coming year. We're seeing all these climate catastrophes around the world. We're seeing refugee catastrophes around the world, and it's usually children and women who suffer the most, because they're also the least powerful when it comes to their ability to participate in the economy. So lots of work to be done, and lots of more conversations to be had. And I really thank everybody that joined us today. So thanks.
Thank you so much for having me. And it was wonderful to chat with my fellow Chilenos.
You're
Carmen,
awesome.
it was great
Carmen.
meeting you. Yes,
Yes.
I agree. I would also like to thank, on behalf of Edmonton Culture, the Edmonton Community Foundation for their generous support. So just a shout out to them. Thank you so much to the ECF.
All right. I guess we
Thanks.
say goodbye now.
Yes.
The sad part.
Maybe, or one
sad
last
part.
question.
I hate
I had
saying
one last question just to be
sure.
facetious, but it's just to be facetious. So if you allow me. Okay. Here we go. So in this movement, so talking about, I guess in general, the Me Too movement, in terms of the greater picture of violence towards women and generations of women or victims being at fault because our skirts are too short, or because we put too much salt in the soup, or because we told Adam to eat the apple. What would you say, as a compassionate socialist feminist, to the patriarchy on this International Day of Eliminating Violence Towards Women?
Oh God, I got lost with the question. You have
Awesome.
to say it again.
Right. I'll start all over. So, in the greater picture
Yes. Okay.
of violence towards women and the generations of women who are at fault for, having too short of skirts, or putting too much salt in the soup, or telling Adam to eat the apple. What would you say, as a compassionate socialist feminist, to the patriarchy on this International Day of Eliminating Violence Towards Women?
Well, all I can say is smash the patriarchy. Because it hurts everybody, not just women. It hurts men as much as it hurts women. Smash the patriarchy. And
Agreed.
as a socialist, I'm not interested in a capitalist society with no patriarchy. Like, to me, that's just the same thing, right? Like, let's have Hillary Clinton be the president. Sure, she's a war criminal, but she's a woman. No, like, as long as there's socialism, I'm all for it.
Yes. Carmen Aguirre for president of Chile. I'll be your minister of health.
Mhm.
That would be great. You can be the minister of culture, Gabriela.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm honored. I'm honored. Yes.
Go see you. Thank you so much,
But
guys.
yeah, I do want to say one tiny thing in regards to that question, though. One tiny thing. So yes, but when I was raped at gunpoint in 1981, I was asked by the police all those things. What were you wearing? Why were you wearing that skirt? Are you sure you didn't want it? All those were like the literal official questions that the cops had to ask. That has changed, thanks to so many women who have done the work. The cops are not allowed to ask anything like that anymore. So I think we also have to celebrate all the work that has been done by so many women. And I think that's a great way to end.
Yes.
Okay.
I think Chris is
Yes.
pointing us out to some of the comments that have been made. So if you don't mind, Angela Hernandez wrote, "We are so fortunate to be here. We are a group of educators listening and learning. Unfortunately, Monica Walker missed your answer because her phone wasn't loading. So she was the one who asked about whether you consider yourself a Buddhist or just following a similar
Oh, no,
path.
she answered.
She said she missed it. She missed your answer.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't consider myself a Buddhist just because I don't want to insult people who actually are Buddhists. Like, I don't practice Buddhism per se, but I do have a very strong meditation practice, and compassion is a very big deal for me. So I guess in that way, yes, I would say that I do have a Buddhist practice.
And we just had a couple more comments from Marina Marshall. Thank you for introducing us to these intellects, Angela. We are indeed fortunate. So yes, thank you for at least for me, can't speak for everybody, but I'm sure I do, is thank you to Angela for inviting so many people to come and listen to this talk today. We really appreciate you, sister. and everything you do in the community and as a teacher.
All right.
Okay. And on that note, we'll end.
Sure.
Sandra, do you want to give us the over and out?
Over and out, people. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.